Welcome back to Natural 2, our D&D and tabletop role-playing podcast slash talk show. Today, I guess I am discussing what to do when a player is missing at your table, though it certainly would be a little bit more fitting to have my co-host here, but I guess it's somewhat topical that I will be handling this alone. But,
Hey, sorry. Sorry, sorry I'm late. My grandma's chicken coop was on fire, and yeah, no, I'm good. I'm here.
well, it's not like we record at the same time every week consistently.
I mean, I'm an adult with responsibilities.
You have
I've
a
got
baby.
I've got crap that I got to do. I can't. I mean, this is just what is this anyway?
Mm-hmm.
All right, okay, yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Anyway, as we were discussing, what to do when a player is missing at your table, which is a somewhat constant nagging annoyance that a lot of groups have. We have someone occasionally with our group because life does sometimes get in the way. So there's a few different ways of handling it, working around it, solutions for it, advice, and we're going to discuss that today. You got anything to start us off with, James?
Uh,
Besides being late?
yeah. Hang on. Let me get my. I have
Yeah.
to get my stuff. I didn't get. Do you have a pencil? I need a pencil.
Oh, you need dice too, or do you want to borrow a book and then never give it back?
Yeah, actually, that sounds good. Let's do that. No, this is gonna end up being kind of beside the point, so I'll just put it in right here. Um, I started out in D&D in a 3.5 game that only played every 2 weeks. So when a session got canceled, it hurt.
Mm-hmm.
You were looking at a month in between games at that point. And I know some people that's how they have to play. They don't have any option. And my heart goes out to you, you poor deprived souls. But sort of born out of that was this desire when I run a game, I have a personal rule at the beginning of the game. This is some session 0 stuff. That if I have half of the group, I'm going. We're playing. So that there's no question, there's no discussion. It's just, all right, well, there are 4 people in your party. We've got 2 of you. We're going to move on. We're going to keep going. Just to avoid cancellations and some of that stuff. It is a lot less of an issue in our current group, partly because I'm not the one in charge, but also because we have an understanding that not every group I've been in has had,
Well, I
and
think
we have
that's the first
that.
big point is like before you even get into advice of what to do is you should have a plan on how you handle players being busy or calling out or not being able to make it. And our more or less like silent handshake agreement we've come up with is if someone can't make it, we try and switch to another day. If that's not possible, then we regretfully play without them. And that's basically how we move from there. And then if 2 people can't make it, we usually then decide probably best to wait because we do play weekly and it's a bit manageable to skip a week because then we can all survive and wait for the next Sunday.
Yeah, that's what we do. We do that because we're cool.
We're
Whether your
efficient.
group is as cool as we are, I mean, you'll have to judge that for yourself. Um, I I don't think that's the first place I would recommend personally that people go, is just this thinking of, oh, we'll hash it out when it comes up. That works if it works.
Mhm.
But you don't want to wait and find out that it doesn't work when you're in the middle of your scheduling and preparation. So the first thing I would personally recommend to consider is something like a standing rule, an expectation that you can communicate to the group up front and say, if you got to be out, that's fine. We'll probably just keep playing. Something else that I did when the group was less tightly knit than our current one is I told people that if you miss 3 times out of like 5 sessions, I'm just going to assume you're not interested anymore and you're out.
Hmm.
Um, but that's some like brand new group stuff or some game store group stuff. Um, you probably won't have to be that strict in your home game with your established friend group, but just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I do eventually want to talk about like what to do when a player's missing, but there is kind of the pre-conversation to have about like how to handle players missing either consistently or randomly or sporadically or for various other reasons. If you are having players like calling out a few hours before the game, or if you're having players that never seem to have time to play, there's always some excuse or some scheduling conflict. There is the one thing we always throw around, communication to be used there. You have to probably express to the player that it is incredibly difficult for you as the DM to keep the group cohesive, to keep the game flowing when you are planning for them to be there and then they are not. So if that is the problem that you are facing versus trying to actually figure out the nuance of a person not being there for a session, then you want to kind of head that off pretty directly with whatever player is causing that problem. And it's not going to be a pleasant conversation. It never is. A lot of the time, the player themselves are not being honest with themselves. And they're like, oh yeah, well, of course I want to be there, and I would love to do this, or oh, you know how it is. I got laid off, 2 months ago, and I've just been in this thing, and you almost kind of have to be like, yeah, but do you really want to be in the game and play? And that's never a good position to be in, but sometimes it is necessary.
It is a team sport, as we've talked about in previous videos, and sometimes that means thinking about the good of the entire group. Um, I was fortunate, I think, in that regard, and that's something that I also learned early in that first 3.5 group, because the guy running that group had been playing D&D since the beginning. He was very, experienced. These were paths that he had trod for a long time before I even started the hobby, and um, he really didn't have trouble when it was time to say, and I sat at the same table when he did it once, and said, hey, this isn't working. It's nothing personal between us, and we're still going to be friends, but I don't think you can keep on in my game.
Hmm.
And um, sometimes you have a responsibility to the rest of the group to know when to do that.
So getting into the actual like how to handle a player being gone for a week or so, I kind of have two different approaches, and I'll kind of see what your player perspective is on them as the DM of our group. There is either the write them off, find some event in universe that or in the story where they're doing something else on some sort of secret mission, or maybe assisting the party in some other off-screen way. You could maybe even get a bit more creative with this and tell them to roll a few I guess like pre-rolled dice and have that dictate some sort of assistance you can feed in, but that's a little bit complicated and won't fit in every scenario. And then there's always just running the player's character kind of like a robot from the DM. You can even hand it off to a player, which we've done a few different times, which I think is a little better than the DM controlling them because that gets a little gray area of how meta you want to be. But I think both solutions come with the issue of sometimes there is a story beat or a puzzle or an encounter or just some sort of like big moment coming up that the character that's now missing was somewhat necessary for. And that is always the biggest hurdle, and you can always write around it. Usually, what I do is I just take it out and move it somewhere else, which doesn't always work the best. But that's always the biggest sting when someone can't make it. It's like, but I had this cool thing for you, and now I cannot do that. But those are my two kind of ways of handling it, at least kind of on the short term.
I think that the first path that you mentioned of finding something within the game for their character to be doing, so that they're not, you don't have to worry about where they are, they're gone doing something else. That is probably the nicest way, the most fun way and the preferable way, and that's good if you've gotten enough advance notice.
Hmm.
What seems to happen most of the time, though, is it might be like the day of,
A
and
few
somebody's like,
hours before,
"Hey,
yeah.
yeah, sorry, something's happened. I'm not going to be there."
Hmm.
So, what's going to happen more often is option B of uh, someone playing their character for them.
Hmm.
And I agree. I don't think the DM should play that person's character for them. That is absolute last resort. I think what's better is for the player to find somebody to cover their shift.
Hmm.
Pick somebody at the table and ask them, like, "Hey, will you run my character while I'm away?" Um,
I think it's
because
essential the player does that too, and not the DM, because then it's the player
yeah,
handing over the reins.
right, and not somebody being given a task by the
Hmm.
DM. So you get them to do that. They hand their character off. The DM doesn't have to worry about, like, well, if I'm playing their character against my own monsters, I'm either going to be playing optimally because I know everything about the monsters, or I'm going to purposely play ignorantly,
Hmm.
and that's a different. Yeah, no, no, no,
Yeah.
no. You don't want to mess with that. So
Hmm.
they can choose somebody else at the table, ask them to run the character, and at that point, just leave it up to that player whether they want to try to do any in-character stuff.
Hmm.
The missing player may not even want them to. That's
Hmm.
between them. Um, I think it's totally fine in that case for um, for them to just, again, they're a bot essentially. Like, I'm going to roll the dice for them and do the things in combat that they would probably do, but they're not going to have a whole lot to say.
Yeah, they might like check the traps or scout ahead, but they're not going to have a deep, meaningful conversation with the NPC or make some character altering decision. They are there to kind of be more of a mechanic than a character at that point. The one thing that I always see come up in this discourse kind of surrounding this topic: should you kill a player or a character when the player is not there? And I think it appears very cut or dry. The answer is no, you never should. But the DM side of me also kind of hates that, because then not only does the player that's not there have this kind of immunity that they are aware of, but the characters in the game do to an extent as well, which usually only if your group hates you would leverage that against you, but it is kind of there. And it's a little agitating as a DM to be like, oh yeah, you guys are cornered, and I don't know how you're going to get out of this situation, and you have that one player character that you don't want to murder or put in danger because, like, he's not here, and it's a really strange situation to be in. But I think overall, usually 98% of the time, bad idea to kill a character when the player is not there.
That was another, I keep referencing my first DM, the OG DM, and that was another one of his rules that I was introduced to early, which is that if you're out, your character will not be killed
Hmm.
while you're not there. And he didn't even really get into why. He was just very matter of fact, no, not doing it.
Hmm.
And I think for all the reasons that you've said, that's the right way to handle it. Sometimes the narrative, sometimes the story of the campaign must necessarily give way to the game part of it in order to keep things from feeling really bad.
Hmm.
And this is definitely one of those moments. Um, so far in my entire history of playing D&D, it hasn't come up. The party has not been in particular danger of dying while someone happened to be gone. Um, but I think were that to be the case, just to play a mini scenario challenge here for a second, if I'm running the game, the party gets cornered and they're going to, let's say, lose. First of all, you have to answer that question that you would always have to answer, which is, am I really going to kill the whole party, or are they going to be taken prisoner, or what have you? Nobody said you couldn't be taken prisoner while you're not here.
Hmm.
Um, but if the party is killed, you still have plenty of room to then go to that person and say, um, I'm going to let you pick. Either your character died with the rest of the group, or you can wake up in a shallow mass grave and they thought that you were
Yeah, your
dead.
dead friends surrounding you. That is,
Yeah, I mean, essentially, not to get too dark here or too fast, but
Mhm,
basically, you're gonna wake up somewhere if you want. Your character will still be alive and can join the next iteration of the
mhm.
party. Um, so there are ways around it that are, varying degrees of cleanliness and smoothness and, narrative difficulty.
I've always, from a DM's point, worried about a player coming back after missing a session that had some like larger narrative consequences or like a big lore dump or something of the sort. We do have the benefit of all of our episodes being recorded, so I can always just send it to the player when they miss a session. But I could imagine if they weren't recorded and you're just going off of like your player's notes or what the DM tells you or what you're being caught up on as you're sitting down to play the next session, it could almost put the player at such a distance that the next session they come back to is difficult, not as much fun, kind of frustrating for them. They're probably slightly annoyed that they could have solved that problem or averted this disaster that the party led them down. And I'm curious if that is the source of friction for a lot of people departing from the game. Because if someone is missing sessions already, that's probably some indication that they're half in, half out, and then trying to get back in after missing a session is probably more difficult than anything else. And I wonder if that's kind of like a compounding effect that eventually leads to a lot of people kind of fizzling and falling off or growing bad behaviors or kind of asking to be kicked in some way. So, yeah, I don't know if there's a particular point to this, but I'm curious if there's a something that the DM could do to help facilitate a player coming back into the fold a little bit better to potentially kind of avoid some of that problem coming up.
I think it's a good idea. Um, this is actually the second group that I've been in that was recording the sessions. I played in person at a table where the DM took audio recordings of all of our games because it helped him with his notes and planning.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's a good idea for every group to have the note taker. Um, and you could take turns with it. It could be passed around the table, or somebody could just volunteer to be the note taker that keeps a record of what happened in the game. And it doesn't have to be like a storybook. Obviously that is impressive and immersive when it's recorded with a dramatic flair, or in an in-character style. But if it's just like notes from a meeting, if it's just a memo, went to town, bought magic sword, went down cave, killed goblins. Like,
Hmm.
that's better than nothing. That's
Hmm.
better than nothing. And it's better than having to get up with people in between and say, "Wait, what happened? What happened last
Hmm.
time?" Or heaven forbid, eat up time at the next session having to say like, "What happened last time? Wait, what why did you do that? What happened?"
I think, yeah, that probably is the actual point I probably should have gotten to is like you should not be catching up the player 5 minutes before the next session goes. Like either text them, Discord group, call them, chat with them, whatever communication you have with them, do that leading up to the next session so they feel a little bit more included and a little bit smoother entry versus getting everything dumped on them and then having to kind of catch up mid game.
And I would say that this is even a realm where it is a little more appropriate to tap a player that you know is good for it and say, "Will you catch them up
Hmm.
before next session?" You could even do it at that session, like, "Hey, would you mind shooting them a text and letting them know before next time what we did?" Uh, just to keep things make the transitions a little nicer.
Hmm.
Um, as far as somebody like, if this is from the perspective of somebody that has missed a session, as we all must every once in a while. If you have somebody that's chronically missing games and you're always having to figure out like how, I got to tell them what happened and where we are, and that's a different problem, and that I would refer you back to the beginning of this video as well as our communication video,
Hmm.
and That's something that is going to take some more effort and some decision making.
But I think we pretty much covered all the points that I've had. Like there aren't a huge variety of ways to handle this, but I think there is a good mindset to have when handling this. There's all the nuance around like what kind of player you're discussing, whether it's someone who is leaving the game or someone who's a great player has missed one session. There's a large spectrum of like the person who is actually missing and how to handle that situation. But yeah, as far as actually dealing with it in the game, whatever makes it flow best, keeps the story going, helps the group stay energized. If there's any moment where you have to like sit there and hash out why this person's gone and spend like 20 minutes explaining it, there's probably a better way of handling that. Yeah, overall, I think that's the majority of my points is to keep the group in mind, keep the player that's missing in the loop, and then just move forward from there whenever you can.
The last little tangent that I'll add, and this will be a good topic for its own video sometime.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, right. I'm surrounded by office supplies. I should write some of these things down. Oh well, I'm not gonna do it. Anyway, the last tangent that I'll offer, the little rabbit hole, is you might wonder like how many people have to go missing before I straight up cancel. Our group, because we're so closely knit and because our story is so focused on narrative, if one person goes missing, we'll tend to try to reschedule so that we can keep them in it. Other groups, not so much. You may have to decide for yourself how many people missing means a canceled game. As I was discussing earlier, in a typical game, if I've got half the group, I'm going to keep going. And I only picked half out of respect for it being a group activity, and I didn't want to start excluding people habitually. I am totally comfortable and have been on both sides of the table for one-on-one games. So, just as an aside, don't be scared. And it might be worth giving that a try if you've got a small group in the first place, and you're really kind of concerned about the numbers. If somebody has to beg off, give it a shot. It's not as bad as you might think. So I just wanted to throw that in, and whatever you want to throw in, put it in the comments down below. And on the way to the comments, between here and there, is the like and subscribe buttons, just so you know.
Always so seamless, every single time.
I mean, the more you do it, the easier it gets, Nathan.
Mm-hmm. Well,
You get the calluses. You get the like and subscribe calluses on your heart.
You get the muscle memory. You got to get their thumbs in the right position so they can just hit those buttons.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, I think
I've seen other videos, right, where they're very phone centric and they show you a whole animation. Like they're giving you a tiny instructional video on how to like and subscribe.
We should pull out our phones and actively like on screen.
Well, I'm here to tell you, brothers and sisters, I don't care what device you're on. All right, I'm not going to single out anybody. Whatever you're on, computer, phone, smart fridge, you name it.
If someone watches us on their smart fridge, I would frame that photo and put it on my fridge.
Yeah, send it to us. I want to see. I want to see that. That would bring joy.
How terrifying would it be to look at your fridge and see our two faces looking back at you?
I mean, in my specific case, it would probably cause me to keep the fridge closed a little more if my own face was stuck up there. Like, oh, I want to get my chin back. I better not open this. Anyway, like and subscribe for the love of Pete.
Also, if you are looking for maps, I make maps. They're free. The description will be down below. If you don't want them to be free, that is your choice, but certainly not necessary. But I think that is all for me, sir.
And me as well. So uh, until next time, be sure to check back right here in 1 week.
Have a good one.